There are tons of mistakes that you might be making right now in ESO that are putting you behind the curve when it comes to things like questing, combat, skills, and many more fundamentals of the game. So I created this quick list of the top mistakes players are making in ESO, starting with number 1, and that is worrying about classes and race. What you need to know before even starting this game is that class and race in the Elder Scrolls Online just doesn't matter that much. More than anything, these choices boil down to personal preference. A perfectly min-maxed race choice for a particular build, let's say DPS for example, will only result in about a 5% improvement over some of the less optimized races, and that's with an insanely min-maxed endgame style build. Class for the most part in ESO doesn't matter either. Every class in ESO can tank, can do healing, can do DPS, and play well in both solo and group content. Again, the differences here are so small that these choices simply come down to your personal preference in the end. So play what interests you, both in terms of class and race, and stop worrying about searching out meta builds because those actually change all the time. Mistake number 2 on our list is choosing the wrong starting zone. Now, this mistake is going to directly affect new players more than anyone else. That's because once you complete the tutorial in ESO, you'll be given a variety of choices for where to go next, depending on what DLC and chapters you purchased. Now, if you got ESO Plus or you have a special chapter deal, this can be an especially difficult choice, but in my opinion, new players should start in a basic starter zone and not a DLC zone. The 3 basic starter zones, or Alliance starting zones as they're sometimes called, are Canarthy's Roost, Stros Mackay, and Bleak Rock Isle. Now, the reason why new players should start here instead of in a DLC zone is because the content here is so much easier and more streamlined than anywhere else. These zones are extremely small for one thing, meaning you can do all the starting quests and find all the sky shards here extremely quickly, helping to give your character a great head start. Enemies here are pretty basic as well, and there's no world bosses or world events that can kill you in just a few seconds. Compare this to chapter zones, for example, like Western Skyrim, which are 3 to 4 times as large, have multiple special bosses and world events that can easily one-shot you, and I think the difference here is pretty clear. So don't start a new character in a DLC area unless you're already experienced. Mistake number 3 has to do with settings, and now that you've started your ESO adventure, you definitely don't want to jump into gameplay without adjusting some of these more unique and specific options. For starters, check out your gameplay settings and make sure you've turned on the custom colors for both friendly and enemy effects. You can change the color here to whatever you want, but just make sure the brightness is turned up high enough so you can actually see it. Staying in friendly effects while also avoiding enemy effects is a big part of ESO that new players especially struggle with. I also recommend diving into the combat section here and turning on as much information as possible. This means always showing ability bars, ability timers, back bar timers, attribute bars, resource numbers, and also your ultimate numbers. There's really no reason that these should be turned off during normal gameplay, unless of course you want to take screenshots, but there's actually a screenshot mode for that anyway, so just make sure these are all turned on. Now that we've covered some of the basic mistakes, let's move into town and discuss some things that you should be doing in-game every day. If you don't do these regularly, then you'll quickly fall behind. The big one here is forgetting to train up your riding skills every day. In ESO, there are 3 separate mount riding skills you can actually train up, that being riding speed, riding stamina, and carrying capacity. It's up to you which you want to focus on first, or even if you want to level them up evenly, but just be consistent here. Since you can only boost 1 skill per day, that's at least 180 days to reach max level. It also helps if you log out your character every day next to the riding trainer so that when you log on the next day, this can be the first thing you do and you don't forget about it. Speaking of things to do in town, another huge mistake in ESO would be to skip doing research. I'm not talking about researching builds or guides, I'm talking about in-game trait research. Much like mount training, learning traits in ESO is something that takes an immense amount of time, so you want to start this process right away. Simply head to any crafting station and it will tell you exactly what gear you're holding that has a trait that you can learn. And when I start off, I don't really care what traits I do first, I just want to consistently unlock new traits every day, whatever I have on me. The obvious benefit of researching here is that once you unlock a certain amount or number of traits for a specific piece, let's say 3 or 5 traits for a two-handed greatsword, for example, you can then craft powerful crafted sets, things like Order's Wrath, one of my favorite sets for particular gear pieces. But traits in ESO are even more valuable due to transmutation and gear reconstruction. With these two options, you can completely change the trait of a piece of gear, or you can create a new gear piece from scratch. The only catch here is that you must have that particular trait researched first before you can change a gear piece to it or construct a new one. So at minimum, you'll want to make sure you have the best traits researched on your character, things like Divines for armor, Precise for weapons, maybe Bloodthirsty or Infused for jewelry. Get those first so that you can make full use of the transmutation system, even if you don't plan on becoming a master crafter. And speaking of crafting here, another big mistake is failing to level up those crafting skills in ESO. This again is something that takes time and needs to be started early. Now, I'm not a master crafter myself by any means, but I still have my crafting skills maxed out on at least one character on my account, and that's so I can upgrade my gear. Getting your crafting skill up to 50 does take time, but it is worth it because it's going to unlock special passives that not only let you research faster like we talked previously, but there's also passives that let you upgrade using fewer materials. You can level up crafting quickly by deconstructing any useless gear that you're not going to equip yourself or that you're not planning on researching. So deconstruct and level up as much as possible when it comes to crafting skills so you don't struggle later on when it's time to upgrade. Another common mistake you don't want to be making is not repairing your armor whenever you have some downtime. That's because you never want your armor to fully break in ESO, especially in the middle of content like a difficult dungeon or a trial. A broken gear in ESO is actually a huge mistake for many reasons. First of all, each armor piece you're wearing has a durability meter. This gradually gets lower over time as you earn experience. And once this meter reaches 0, your armor piece is officially broken and you'll actually start to lose its armor bonus as well as other stats it provides. Now luckily you do get notified with this red icon that appears on the heads-up display whenever you have at least one armor piece broken, but you want to actually repair before then. Like I said, you don't want to get caught in a dungeon or trial when this happens. Repairing can be done in town through a merchant, just pay some gold there. There's also repair kits. I do recommend having those on hand in case you get stuck out in the open. But the reason why you do this and the reason why it's so important also has to do with armor skills. For example, the light armor shield called Dampened Magic, it's a very useful skill, but you won't be able to cast this if your broken armor pieces take you under the 5 pieces of armor that's required to actually cast the skill. It just will stop working, and I've had this actually happen in the middle of combat and it's really not fun. So make sure you pay attention to this one. Repair that armor every chance you get. The next mistake on our list is not using a Mundus Stone. This detail is actually very easy to overlook when setting up your build. I've done this many times myself, and it's also difficult for new players because Mundus Stones don't really exist in the starting areas or even in DLC zones. So to get the right Mundus Stone, you do need to basically know where to look. With that being said, basically any Mundus Stone is better than nothing, and it'll be a huge improvement over not using one at all. And if you do need a recommendation, I actually start most of my builds with the Steed Mundus. This is actually very helpful for new characters because it boosts your movement speed. And it also gives you extra health recovery, which helps with survivability as well. So it's kind of like 2 Mundus Stones for the price of one. Definitely recommend you pick that up if you have nothing else to go with. Not having a food or drink buff active is a huge mistake in the Elder Scrolls Online. These buffs are actually super powerful, giving you a ton of max resources or recovery, or in some cases a combination of both. Make sure you always have food or drink on hand and refresh it once it's getting low. You can consume these in advance. You don't have to wait until they run out. In fact, you definitely do not want them to run out in the middle of combat, so go ahead and refresh those early and make sure you always have them with you. Next mistake I wanted to mention is not unlocking your guild skill lines. This is kind of awkward the way that ESO handles it, so I always mention this. There are 3 basic NPC guilds that you can join at the start of the game. That's the Fighters Guild, Mages Guild, and the Undaunted. And to do this, you just head over to your main Alliance city. So for my Dark Elf here, that would be Devon's Watch, and you speak to the quest giver for each guild. It's pretty simple. The Mages Guild and Fighters Guild should be marked pretty clearly on your map and are easy to find, while the Undaunted may take a little bit more searching, but typically, anywhere you can find drinks would be a good place to start with them. So this is important not just to see and start tracking those skill lines, but especially for the Fighters Guild, because it only levels up by killing Daedra or undead creatures, or by closing dolmens. So if you do not unlock the skill line by completing the quest, any of those enemies that you defeat or any of the dolmens that you finish, that's not going to level up your skill line. It's going to basically be worthless. And it's extremely simple. It just takes 1 minute, but do not forget this. This is an essential step that you need to start on any new character. Next up, let's talk combat, and a huge mistake you don't want to make, that's skipping out on light attacks. Now, light attacks are the most basic attack type in ESO, but they do a lot more than just damage. For example, light attacks will proc your weapon glyph, which can apply useful status effects, and even restore resources. And light attacks are also key for triggering certain sets like Kinra's Wrath or Arms of Reliquin, as well as powerful skills like the Nightblade's Merciless Resolve. All of these involve stacking mechanics where you need to consistently light attack or you'll lose the bonus. So obviously light attacking is a big deal. And did you know that light attacks also proc an invisible bonus on your character that generates ultimate? Watching this example as I use just my skills and no light attacks, you can see I'm not generating any ultimate at all. But as soon as I use just one light attack in my rotation, that ultimate generation kicks in and earns me 27 ultimate over the next few seconds. This ultimate generation will continue during the course of combat as long as you're mixing in those light attacks in between abilities. And what's even crazier is the ultimate gen here even continues after combat ends, which is a huge tip for maximizing your ultimate casts. Talking about resource management again here, there is another huge issue I see a lot, especially in group content, and that is players that run out of stamina after sprinting for too long or doing too many roll dodges in a row. You definitely don't want to do this because it leaves you very vulnerable and you won't have enough stamina left to break free from crowd control effects when you truly need to, most likely resulting in death. Now here's a trick to help you learn exactly how much stamina you need in reserve in order to break free should you get CC'd. Open up your advanced stats area, which you can see on both PC and consoles. Look at your break free cost. On my Magicka Templar, for example, it's about 4,000 stamina for me to break free. Then compare this number to your total stamina pool. In my case, I have about 16,000 stamina, so that means I need at least 4,000 stamina, or about 25% of my total stamina pool, to break free at any time. Knowing this, I never want to dip under that 25% mark. If I'm getting close, then I need to stop sprinting and I need to conserve my roll dodges and even my blocks until my stamina goes back up into a safer area. Obviously, this is going to be different for every build depending on your total stamina, so make sure to check yours like I just showed you. And that leads us to our number one mistake on this list, and that's forgetting to equip gear drops to add them to your collection. Now, the collection system is a huge part of ESO, and it's a big quality of life improvement if you use it correctly. Basically, what collections does is it adds pieces of gear to a sticker book, and this allows you to reconstruct the gear you've already collected using transmute crystals. Now, we already talked about how you need to research traits to actually reconstruct the gear, which is important too, but the part that usually gets missed in all of this is that when you pick up most gear in ESO, it doesn't get collected or added to your collections right away. To collect gear in most cases, you need to bind it first. This means actually equipping the piece of gear on your character to bind it in the first place. Once you do this, it will then finally appear in your collections. Also, selling a piece of gear to a merchant accomplishes the same thing. And one final really important thing to know here has to do with curated set drops. This means that enemies in dungeons, for example, will only drop set pieces that you haven't collected already. So if you want to complete your sticker book and get all the possible gear pieces, then getting your collections complete as soon as possible is extremely important. You can accelerate this process as soon as you get a drop in a dungeon by equipping it on your character to bind it so that the following drop you get won't be a duplicate. But hopefully you all found this beginner guide helpful. If you're interested, we actually have an extended version with even more mistakes and tips on our YouTube members page. That is our Tier 2 Elite Squad members. We'll also get tons of other great perks like members-only builds, early access to videos, and members-only Discord. Plus, it's a great way to support the channel. Huge shout out, as always, to our amazing member team. Thank you all for making this channel possible. Thanks to all of you for watching this video, and I will see you around in the next one.